More people are joining us now. All right, so welcome everyone to the first episode of the Display Room, brought to you by Be Young Fine Arts from around the world. So I want to say a special thank you to all of our guests. I am really looking forward to this first episode and see where it goes. Okay, just to give people a little bit of background about Be Young Fine Arts. Our art organization is based in Shanghai, and currently due to the pandemic is split in Shanghai, China, and in Hong Kong right now. So we're split up in Shanghai, the United States, and Hong Kong. So we're kind of split up around the world right now. Our organization puts on exhibitions and events and partners with different galleries throughout Shanghai. And we've been doing this since 2019 and just helping emerging artists to showcase their work and help also sell their work. All right, so this is our team. Chung Chung is the Assistant Director of Be Young Fine Arts, and I'm the founder, Brittany Young, of Be Young Fine Arts. And we have Will over here, which is one of our volunteers. And we are run and based off of volunteers. We need our volunteers to help our organization run. So they will help us with the smallest things, as ordering things online that we need for the exhibition, helping our artists ship their artwork to the gallery, and just assist them in any way possible. So yeah, this is our small little team, but they are an amazing team. All right, so in the past, we've done artist talks in person. Generally during our opening reception, we've had several artist talks with the artists that we're showcasing during our exhibition. We would also have like the tea time. These are all at different galleries. We had Mo Gallery and Lounge here, which was a VIP exhibition and auction that we did. We had the audience come in and do a Q&A with our artists, and then we also did a film screening for John Rash's Yangtze Drift. And then on the far right is our partner gallery, Bao Gallery. We did like a tea time there where we invited some of our artists to come have tea and just talk, and we recorded that. It was a lot of fun. So now, of course, due to the pandemic, you know, we can't be inside at the gallery right now, and we just thought of how to best utilize this opportunity. And after the Black Lives Matter exhibition, it really, you know, pushed us to see how we can provide our platform to use it for greater good. And so with that, we decided to create the display room. And right now we're splitting this into 3 episodes throughout July. So this is our first episode, Artivism. And we will talk about the role of art and in activism in 2020. And our next episode will be documenting COVID-19 through art and looking at some of the artwork from the Under the Rock exhibition, which I helped curate for that show. And we will have on some guest artists. And then in episode 3, we'll talk about cultural appropriation versus appreciation in art. So on to our first episode, Artivism. So welcome and meet our panel. We have Candace Michelle, who is an actor, singer-songwriter, and she is the creator of Candid with Candace, which you can find on YouTube. And we will get to know more about her throughout the show, so I'm very excited. And Candace is currently, where are you now, Candace?
I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, she's holding it down, Dallas, Texas. Be safe out there. We also have us joining today, Kat Day. Kat Day is an artist, a model, and author. She is the owner of the International Carrier, which is a nonprofit organization. She works with her son, Aiden, in helping him to create artwork, and they both submitted pieces for our Black Lives Matter exhibition. I'll show you a few of her pieces here. So In You, I See Me was one of the pieces that she submitted during our Black Lives Matter online exhibition. And it was really just a heartfelt piece that she shared with us. And she also shared her Darkest Days piece that she created with her son, Aiden, in tribute to George Floyd. And all of these pieces that you can see on YouTube with our whole recorded exhibition. That was 3 hours long, but it was absolutely amazing. And I was really happy to have her and a lot of the artists on board during that exhibition. And next we have Miss Heather Spencer. And Heather Spencer is a New York-based artist, and she is just a ball of joy. I really enjoy speaking and talking with Heather, and I was happy to have her on again here at with our show, our first episode. She just had so much passion about utilizing the power of art to speak out about what's happening in the world. And so this was one of the pieces that she submitted, Another Kind of Rainbow. And we have Jennifer Sheils Hollanes. Jennifer is a graphic designer. She's based in Shanghai, China, but is in the Philippines. And she used to debate and currently teaches children, teaches students, I don't know how young they are, to debate and stay engaged with the political process and just everything that is happening around the world. This was her piece that she submitted, Say Their Names, that we recently posted up on our social media. And it's, something that I feel like we can't forget, especially, as news comes around more and more every day. We're seeing new cases pop up. We need to remember to say their names, but not only say their names, but remember these people and why we are here even talking about this. Why did we ever even have the Black Lives Matter movement? All right, so now it's time for our game time. And our game time, this will be a time to ask questions. I will be asking you questions, and you will answer the questions to the best of your ability. Some are fun questions, some are serious, and some are just trying to get to know you more as a creative individual. So I'm going to stop my share so we can use this all together. All right. So let me pull up my handy dandy cell phone. All right, I wish I had some kind of music or something to like start off the something like that. Well, let the games begin.
Yeah.
All right, so our first question is, what ice cream flavor best describes your personality?
Oh, God. We just chime in?
Yeah, you just chime in. Anyone can.
Rocky Road.
Rocky Road.
I'm just like, no, I love Rocky Road. And you know what Rocky Road is really good? It's complex. There's a lot of different flavors. It's chocolate, hey. I love Rocky Road ice cream. I'm gonna say Rocky Road. That's my answer. That's my final answer.
All right, Rocky Road ice cream. How about who else? What ice cream flavor best
I think
personality?
For me, it's one of those, like, it just kind of is a little sharp on the tongue at first with that mint, but it's sweet underlying. I don't know. A lot of my perspectives are that way, and And so I sort of, I skirt along professionalism while also being a very free form artist. So I think mint chocolate's it for me.
Oh, mint chocolate.
I answered
Deep meaning. I love that.
I would go with cookies and cream. It's my absolute favorite. I think it's mainly because it's a classic childhood favorite, and I think that I'd like to maintain like that level of expression and freedom that I had as a child when creating art without having a care in the world what other people think, and trying to maintain that level of freedom of expression that I used to have like when I was back in childhood. So cookies and cream it is.
That's actually, I was gonna say it too. I love cookies and cream. I mean, I love eating it, but I was going to pick that if that was like my ice cream flavor. It's just, there's so many memories. I feel like it kind of fills you. It's a little bits and pieces of something so special that you wouldn't expect that, wow, this would be so amazing. Not that I'm saying, wow, I'm so amazing, but
you are amazing.
You are. So that also works.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with strawberry cheesecake. Because it's like, yeah, and like it looks like sweet and like fun, but it has like a component to it that's very raw and like surprising.
Wow, these are all really amazing answers, guys. And I
I
wonder,
really want to eat ice cream now.
I know.
oh, what brand it'll be. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I have frozen yogurt in my freezer. I'm that person. I like frozen yogurt. I don't know about anyone else.
It's okay.
Okay, I'm on my own lone island with frozen yogurt. All right, so our next question is, you only have one creative tool to use for the rest of your life. What is it? You can only pick one creative tool to use for the rest of your life. I like Candace is like stunned.
that's very
one creative tool.
It can't be digital, right? Like I can't say my laptop.
Because your laptop, you have all the apps, right?
That's everything.
That's what I was thinking.
Anything. What? Just think of you as an artist. What do you use the most? I mean, how do you create art? How can you live without this one tool if you have to pick one?
I would have to say my pencil. I mean, but even that is really, really hard to say because I'm multidisciplinary. So I do sculpting, I do collage, painting, just mixed media pieces. So even saying a pencil, I feel like I'm betraying everything else that I'm about to. But I had at least something to write with.
Well, if we can say laptop, then I'd say laptop. But if I was like stranded on an island, I couldn't plug in my laptop, right? Yeah. I would probably take up my guitar or something, a musical instrument or something. It would be nice. Until the strings like got bad or something. I don't know. That's a really hard question.
Yeah, that's how I put it. I just want to give you a little bit of a challenge.
I am used to, I would say my iPad, if I were to do that, I do a lot of digital art, but I do feel like that might be cheating. I would probably say like writing, because I feel like I usually have like a lot of layers and components in my like visual art, and I feel like writing, you can almost create that in your own unique way, and you still have that voice and that ability to create those layers. So I would go with writing, if that counts.
So I can't say iPad, I can't say laptop. Like if those options are not available and I'm stranded on an island, then in that case I would really hope that I have a lot of paint, because like I work with a lot of layers in Procreate and Illustrator or like Photoshop, and if I'm not able to use any of those digital tools, and having paint would like lead me back to like practice more like what I learned back in college and still replicate some of the visual elements that I'd like to see. So hopefully paint, which is something that I should practice again.
Yeah, you can actually, if you're stranded on your own desert island, I mean, maybe your own would have more things, but if you're stranded on a desert island, you could probably make some of your own paint.
That is
You know,
true.
my students, they made some of their own paints, and that was like one activity we had them do. They would just like take plants from our greenhouse garden that we had to create paints, and it was really amazing. They loved doing that.
So cool.
Oh. All right, we'll move on to the next question. So this one might be a little bit easier. Who is your creative inspiration?
Oh gosh.
It's a hard question. Oh, it's hard.
For me, I would have to say my son. It's been many different sources through my growing up and all through my life, but at this point in my life, Aiden specifically being autistic and, you know, having the cognitive disability that he has and still being able to create the amazing work that comes out of him, it really makes me realize that, I mean, there really shouldn't be the word can't in my own vocabulary. And he not only inspires me, but he motivates me to just keep moving forward with everything that I do, to take my own art way more seriously, and just to, I don't know, he is, I think now, my main source of inspiration as an individual.
That's beautiful. Anyone else?
So for me, I guess I would have to say my big sister. Her name is Gwendy. So I could remember back when I was like a kid, she was the first like inspiration that I have to pursue arts. So even when I didn't start school yet, she would make illustrations and storybooks and like homemade paper dolls, and that really got me interested into art. And in the Philippines and a lot of like Southeast Asian nations, it's a very difficult road to choose when you start telling your parents that I want to pursue art. A lot of them are probably going to be like, why don't you be a doctor, a lawyer, or insert like other professions here, and like just don't go with arts because it's not going to feed you and you're going to have a tough time. So during her time then, her growing as an artist, it was very difficult to live in that kind of landscape in terms of like the stigma that we have against artists and how we associate doing art with like not making like any profit. And for me, her bravery and all that has led up to her being an amazing artist today just really truly inspires me, and she continues to support me in everything that I do. In fact, I started studying accountancy, which is like this is very far off from art, and then seeing her and being able to make that change also inspired me to like tell my parents like, I'm sorry, like I can't do this anymore, like I would love to pursue art. And they were very supportive in that regard. And I think that she had to go through a multitude of difficult barriers to get to where she is right now, and she always tries to make sure that I don't have to go through that same level of like agony when it comes to breaking out as an artist. So I would always honor her as my number one inspiration.
Aww. I think family is really inspirational, at least for myself. And I've always been a writer since I was young, and my dad has been, you know, he's a writer, and he's been my huge source of inspiration. I just remember when I was little, I would sit down, I would just always have a notebook in my hand, no matter where I went. I was just writing and writing all these stories. Kind of start off as like fan fiction, Harry Potter. But I was always writing all the time, and it just, you know, even if that was my tool that I was stranded with, it would be a pen, because I love to write, and he's always, you know, inspired me, encouraged me to write. And even now, whenever I came back to the States, he's like, I still have all your writings from when we were younger, just like buckets. I'm like, this is crazy. I must be crazy. I just have like buckets of notebooks. Probably Harry Potter fan fiction, other things like that. I was actually trying to create some pretty good stories, not just fan fiction, but yeah, family is such a really great source of inspiration for creativity. Yeah.
That is true. That's so nice.
Mine that
Go ahead. Go
okay.
ahead. Yeah.
Mine feels very left field now. I'm gonna say Paul Newman. I've always he's one of the first like actors and celebrities that really was that I was aware of that was able to take their notoriety and really do something impactful for various communities, and to understand that with that amount of success there's a lot of influence and a lot of power that you have to really be able to impact other people's lives, and that there is almost that responsibility to do so. And so I've always been very inspired by the amount that he was able to touch. And so I'm gonna say Paul Newman.
So I'm part of the panel, but I want to say I agree with you. I'm a big Paul Newman fan, and I'm Kat's fiance, and I'm just observing. I'm not a part of it. But when you
jump in if you want.
He's a great actor, and he is a good activist. And you're absolutely right. He's done a lot for humanity, and you know, he's a great actor, especially with Robert Redford. So anyway, I just want to chime in. Good call.
Fiance, he's my art manager. Well, my manager too for my art career. So that's a really good answer.
So I have to have like a one person. I don't know. That's a really tricky question for me because I'm inspired by so many different people, and sometimes I will come across a person that's like a complete stranger, and they'll say something or they'll do something, and I'll just see it and be like, wow, I'm inspired by that act of kindness or that random, you know, like, I don't know. I'm just that kind of way. There are, of course, artists that I love and adore, but I pull inspiration from everything. Like I've been very inspired recently by nature, and I know that's not a person, but I've been taking really long walks and just like basking in the sun and rolling in the grass, you know, doing all of that stuff. So, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, who or what, it's, you know, open-ended, but yeah. So we'll jump into the next question. This one might be really interesting. What is the best and worst thing about 2020, guys?
Well, first of all, I do recall those memes. Remember when that meme came out and it was like, oh, the 4th of July is on a Saturday. Halloween's going to be on a Saturday. This is going to be on a Friday. And like everybody was getting like hype for 2020. Right. And now it's been the complete opposite. Like we've been in our house for half the year. Oh my God. But I guess I'll go first. Okay. I think the best thing has been okay, I mean, there's been a lot of bad things that have happened, obviously. Coronavirus, I wouldn't say the protests were a bad thing, but it was spurred from a bad thing. But I think it's made us all so much more aware of how we've been doing things and that it's not working, and it's spurred a change in people. And I think it's spurring a better, you know, it's making people want to be better and be empathetic and more understanding and caring, but it's been a really hard time too, because we're having to like check ourselves, like, oh, I've been doing, oh, I can't say a bad word, I've been doing things wrong. And I need to, you know, humble myself and change, you know. And with coronavirus too, like put on a mask, you know, like be considerate of other people, you know, like I think this year's been really rough with all those things, but it's teaching us like that there are other people around us that we need to be mindful of. Whoa!
Agreed.
I feel like, I mean, I agree entirely that here everybody woke up. I think that probably since 2012, a whole large portion of humanity all over the world sort of beginning to say, you know, there's an awakening coming, there's an awakening coming, there's an awakening coming. And so many of us who were kind of there already were just like, yeah, I don't think that anything could happen to jar the masses awake. But I truly feel and have observed that it literally took a pandemic, a very isolating and casualty driven pandemic, to make everyone realize what is most important, make them come to terms with all the things we have been doing wrong and what needs to change in our systems. And, you know, it also gave everyone enough downtime to now educate ourselves and to, you know, let's do the art that we've had backed up for years. Let's write a book that we've had on the shelf. Let's do all of these entrepreneurial things that we have had in us, but haven't been able to because we've been slaving to jobs that, you know, could give a crap here or there if we're part of it or not. And yet the downside of that is now we're all having to figure out how to earn money and support ourselves on our own. And it's sort of like that fledgling stage of being kicked out of the nest. And like, fly, little birdie, fly. And, you know, the thing that did it was fate and reality, and it wasn't necessarily anyone's fault. Now that it's here, the upside is that we are finding out what we are capable of, what we need to be doing, what we should have been doing. The downside would definitely be trying to, you know, wade through the confusion of how to get there. But, you know, again, learning process, growing process. I think it's beautiful.
I have to agree there. You know, it's like perception. You can either see this as a terrible thing and allow it to overwhelm you. And it's very easy to allow everything that's happened in 2020 to overwhelm you, or you to look the other way. But it's forced everyone to wake up, or try to wake up to the reality that is going on. I mean, and it's sad, yeah, I talked about this with my dad. It took a pandemic. It really, you know, for a lot of people, it takes something really hard for them to understand, like, you know, for why LGBTQIA lives matter, why Black lives matter. They, you know, they come out, their son or daughter is gay, and now they understand. And now, you know, it has to be something so impactful. And it's unfortunate that it was a pandemic that has caused a lot of casualties that I felt was coming, you know, whether or not, you know, this pandemic was coming, because we had to address a lot of things. We saw our impact on the environment as soon as people were forced to stay at home. We saw, you know, everyone now having to stay 6 feet apart, but, you know, we've lived in a kind of segregated society where we're already pushing people away. Now you have to stay away from people in order to, you know, survive. So I hope people come out of this, you know, waking up and realizing it. I see a change, and obviously people out in the streets and, you know, protesting and everything. And people are starting to see a change. So I think it's kind of good, because it needed to happen. We had to stop the conversation about, like, oh, the environment and the next generation will handle it. And, oh, you know, teach kids equality from very young age, but that's not really going to happen. So it was just always pushing these things aside, pushing it under a rug, and now it's here, you know. The poop has hit the ceiling, for a lack of better words.
Yeah.
I mean, I would definitely agree with that. And to just like echo a few points that I've heard as well, like, I think that COVID-19 and this pandemic is hands down the worst thing that has ever happened in 2020 for a lot of reasons. But specifically for me, in terms of how we already have pre-existing socio-political problems that we have been facing before the pandemic. And now that this happened, this just basically made things a whole lot worse. So when you're going to think about vulnerable stakeholders, such as minorities, when you're talking about women in particular, for example, in the cases and spike in domestic abuses that are ongoing right now, when you're talking about people who are already living below the poverty line, even being pushed even further, and people who are not even there now having to live under that line as well. And it also just like highlights, bolds, and italicizes all the mistakes that our government might have. And it's quite frustrating to see that these are issues that already existed before, and instead of like banding together and helping each other out during a time of crisis, like people decided to build walls like with each other and to use this to basically weaponize certain things that are ongoing against other groups of individuals, which I think is not something that humanity as like a collective should be doing. But ending with a positive note, what is the best thing that happened in 2020? I do feel like the rise of accessibility is really important. And I think that it's great that after COVID-19 happened, we are seeing a lot of like museums, for example, that would otherwise charge admissions, or people who just merely cannot travel outside of their own homes are now able to view these live galleries. When you're talking about accessibility to competitions, like I coach speech and debate, and it was very difficult for me growing in a like public school back in high school. I will not have the same level of opportunities as kids who are in private schools or like high level schools who have the resources to give them access to these debate tournaments. So it was very hard to see that kind of disparity, but at least with this pandemic as well, and it's actually opened doors for international debate and speech tournaments to happen. And in that case, it can also just be in the comfort of your own home. So you are now seeing individuals who otherwise would not have the opportunity for international exposure being able to speak on that stage, because the pandemic has allowed for people to start shifting towards online tournaments, which is open to everybody who has internet. So I think in terms of accessibility, it's one of the biggest like wins of 2020, and I hope that it's going to be here to stay in terms of how open we are to sharing resources that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing a lot of great input, and I think it'll be really this will be a really good transition into our art and activism episode. So I'll try to go back. Oh gosh, there we go. We're back, guys, to my wonderful PPT. All right, so we're going to go into the first episode of Artivism. So it's, you know, in this episode, we're looking at art and activism in 2020, but due to the Black Lives Matter movement, that's been like the predominant lead of activism in 2020. So a lot of the artwork that we'll be looking at and discussing will be about the Black Lives Matter movement. So this first one is a Black Lives Matter mural. It's a chalk mural that was designed by Cassandra Bay and the Midnight Muralists. And they are, this started off with a woman named Katie Driscoll, a lady named Katie Driscoll. She tutors these students, and her students were aware of the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests, and you know, they're really fired up and engaged, and they wanted to get involved, but their parents wouldn't allow them to go to any of the protests. So they're trying to think of a way of how they can get involved and you know, bring awareness to the movement and start a conversation within their own communities, which is really important. And I feel like that's really how we're going to address you know, some of the aspects of systemic racism, which is, you know, the problem and one of the foundations for why the Black Lives Matter movement has started, but starting the conversation within their own communities. So we're going to take a look at this video, and then we're going to look at some close shots of their mural. All right, so the students wanted to challenge their neighbors. They wanted to challenge their neighbors to have this conversation about why this movement was happening, to have a conversation about racism. And Katie Driscoll has said to the Pasadena News Star, we believe this is what invested citizenship looks like. And we believe that the youth involvement in that effort is essential and something that should be supported by everyone. And you can chime in at any time. We'll also talk about this after we view all of the murals on here. But I think it's just really amazing to see young people come together and find a way to stay engaged, or not, even if they're not old enough to go out and vote, or their parents won't let them go to a protest. And this is the students late at night working on the mural, driving up with their cars, people holding flashlights, to help them to create, to fill in and draw the mural and give their contribution to the Black Lives Matter movement. And like we said at the beginning, they did this as a conversation starter. They wanted this conversation to happen in their neighborhood because obviously they felt in their neighborhood, racism and these types of conversations need to happen if any change was going to occur. Of course, not everyone agreed with that. This woman, they called her, I'm sure y'all have heard of the term Karen. I don't know if anyone's offended by the term Karen, but anyways. So they said, this woman, they called her Karen, and said that she came over with her husband. There's another picture with her husband, but she came with her husband and began washing the mural, one of the murals that they drew on. And she was not just washing away everything. She was editing out words that the students had drew, such as justice. It said no justice. And she said, justice has been served, so this doesn't need to be here. And then she was editing out other words. She edited out, there's the phrase that's been going on, white silence is violence, and she erased away the violence part inside of that mural. So now I'm gonna try to put us on a grid here. So seeing everything here and these students' murals, I just want to, get your feedback. Like, the students were able to be a part of this conversation. They use art, one of the most powerful tools to be able to go out and express themselves whenever they were limited in other ways. So what are your thoughts when you hear a story like this? How do you feel, do you feel the students were going in the right direction, or just what are your thoughts about these murals and them using the power of art to speak out? And anyone can speak if they have something they want to say.
I think it's incredibly important that their families and community actually allowed them to do that, because I find personally one of the things that I see when it comes to very big movements and societal tragedies and different things like that going on, there's really not much paying attention to the youth. And I don't just mean young 20s, I mean the teenagers and the children who very much are silently to the side witnessing everything that's going on. And their opinion sets, their emotional sets come from a very innocent place, a very primal place, and sort of like that starting point that we all once were at. It's not clouded by their opinions of a workplace. It's not clouded by, you know, normal financial ongoings of adult life. It's not clouded by other things that would distract from the point. And when children see something and they're jarred by something, they're jarred by that thing alone. And to tell them to shut up and sit down and opinion doesn't matter is abusive, actually, in my opinion. Now, do I think and condone that parents and adults should rally their children and try to get them involved when it's something that's above their head? No, of course not. But when that child is displaying to you that they on their own are coming to you and wanting to express themselves and needing to get something out because they're actually and authentically hurting or traumatized or freaked out by something that's going on, something like this is the best and healthiest way to allow them to do something that is important and more important than it may seem in the time that it's being done. And as a follow-up to that too, specifically about chalk and sidewalk type of art right now during this pandemic, it's seeming to be so important to be able to get messages out through sidewalk chalk writing, whether it's just messages of hope in general. People have left rainbows and other sorts of things to, you know, keep everyone's hopes up. And so writing important messages like that actually catch your attention and really make you think about things that may not be comfortable. I think that it's brilliant, and I'm really happy that they allowed those kids to do that.
Mm-hmm. I agree with Kat. I think that this is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go. No, I went last time.
There's a little bit of feedback, so I didn't know if I was speaking over you. I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I agree. I think that children are able to see the world clearer in a way, I think. And they speak from a place of innocence. So it's like a place of purity and truth, you know. So whenever I see something like this, I'm so inspired. There we go with the inspiration. And, you know, Karen erasing it off the sidewalk, I think, you know, the kids can always go back and put something else there. It's actually teaching them, like, if somebody tries to block you or erase what you put down, doesn't mean you have to let them. Like, go get your chalk and put it back out there, you know? That's what I think. I'm so inspired by this. And I love that justice for all, because, you know, we all had to stand in school and say it every single day.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't said it in years, but reading it, I was just like, oh, it took me right back to childhood. And I was like, wow, we were saying some really important things, and I don't even think we really acknowledged what we were saying then, and how important it is, and how we're still fighting for that. That's all I had to say about that.
I think this is like such an important lesson for those kids to learn, and that it's so rich in symbolism, because like I don't want them to go back out with their chalk. I want them to go back out with their paint. And like I saw a thing recently that was saying the reason that people insist you go through proper channels is because they know that they control the proper channels and that it won't work. And this makes my blood boil, the Karen, obviously. I think that it is so symbolic of a white person erasing the word violence in terms of white violence. And I love that they documented it. I love that they're like, it's actually kind of the like original advertising for like the Marlboro Man had like the guy's cowboy hat over the face like this, because then you'd look at it and you could see it as it being anyone. And like that image itself of that Karen really is that you can imagine that being anyone, taking that moment and like quieting the kids' voices, because I feel like I've seen kids less as like innocence and more as like the truth, like purity, but in terms of being able to speak without anything that society has instilled in you as being a normal thing. And like the fact that they had to go on the sidewalk with chalk in the first place was because their parents felt uncomfortable. And like here they see someone from their parents' generation erasing their work. And I can only imagine if that makes me furious, like how it would make them feel. And I feel like that is like a very important lesson for them to learn and to work to do something to predict it in the next step, the next time they do it, to know that there will be that that it isn't as innocent as a street drawing, that there will be people fighting against them, and that they have this experience and this frame of reference to know for their future as activists to like anticipate the naysayers.
So just to add to that as well, I really do believe that like activism will always be met with resistance as well. In the existence of a Karen, there will always be a Karen in our lives and in any career and everything that you do. And the fact that she is right there wiping off like these very impactful messages is basically proving that these things are effective. It is provoking people and it is getting the message across. So I would take the presence of a Karen as something that is good. The fact that these kids really are sending their message across and it has been heard. And of course, it will be met with resistance. And this is a valuable lesson for them as well to see that, of course, like just like what my other panelists have said, this is something to show them that this is going to be what they're going to be up against in the future as well. But like more like three things about it, right? So in terms of like one, what the medium is, I think that using chalk art is specifically very effective in this regard, because oftentimes you see a lot of people avoid the news, confrontation, and intellectual discourse like the plague. So you have a lot of people who are very ill-informed about all these social issues, and like using the medium such as chalk art makes that type of messages accessible to them. They get to see it on the street. So even if they don't engage in proper discourse or debates with everybody in terms of why like Black lives really do matter, this is something that's going to stare them literally right in their face when they start walking out. And I think that's a very effective medium to use. In terms of who is doing this, it's very impactful that it is younger individuals that are stepping up and doing like writing all these messages in chalk, because oftentimes their voices, the youth, are not really represented as much in like hard news or like opinion articles, right? You need to have a certain level of credibility or accolades in order to be taken seriously by individuals who might be older than you, and having them use this as a means to get their message across is very powerful, given that it's from a different generation as well, and where it was made, for me, it makes it all the more efficient because it's in the streets. It's something that you can see every day, but there's like pros and cons to it. People can go up and erase it, but you could always again take your chalk and write it back in again. So it's more on following up with the art that you've made, making sure that the message is continuously being clear throughout several days, which can be challenging, but I really adore them for doing this.
Yes, and I hope these students continue to do it. And they said they will. They say you can erase our chalk away, but we will come back and we will continue to do it. And, you know, that's one thing I've been really advocating for is you can't delete your communities. There's, you know, people on your Facebook or your family, you might be frustrated with what they're saying because they don't, you know, they don't agree with the movement, but, you know, they only receive their information from a very specific source that accommodates to their way of thinking. So, you know, stuff like this, they can't run away from it. They have to address it. They're driving past and, oh, what's that? Oh, Black Lives Matter, what? And, you know, they can add more to it that they wouldn't be having that conversation elsewhere. And even though they're not going to, you know, sit down and have a conversation with someone on the sidewalk, they'll go back home and they'll be thinking about this even whenever they go to their source for news or engage with their, you know, friends and family for those conversations. So, you know, you can wipe things away, but, you know, it says one thing to the students, to young people, your voice doesn't matter. We, you know, especially those who are eligible, you know, 18 and can vote, and they only want your vote, but they don't want to actually listen to your opinion. So I'm glad these students are, you know, able to speak up and keep speaking up, because the youth are the future, and we are in the state we are now because, you know, generations past have allowed this to prolong. So I'm glad to see that they're putting an end to this and continuing forward. All right, so you can take a screenshot, picture of this. This is everywhere in Pasadena, Aladina. These are the streets and roads where you can actually go and view their work, and some of it might have been taken away due to weather, or maybe, you know, a Karen coming and washing it through. But you can go and, you know, take a look, and you can also follow their Instagram that I put up earlier, and continue to see their work and their action. So these next two videos are going to show, it's like the future of activism. They are two different they're different mediums of art that I quite frankly haven't seen recently. So this was created by Amir, and him and his one of his partners owns this company called REM5, and they are a virtual company. They create virtual spaces for parties and what have you, and for businesses. And so he's a designer, and he you know, used his skills, both the virtual medium and his design skills, to edit some different signs. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that. It's really interesting. And then the next one be the change. And two very quick videos. But I thought they were really interesting. I like seeing how technology has evolved and how people are utilizing that. And I hope to be working with them in the future with creating virtual spaces for galleries, because it might look like this is, you know, the future. So I just wanted to get your feedback on how do you see art evolving during, you know, the time of activism? Like, how have you seen art evolved? What do you think of these pieces?
Really cool. I like the Be the Change. Is that, you said that was digital?
It's virtual, so
there's a,
I don't know how
he made it. Okay.
Yeah, so it's virtual. You put on like the VR.
Oh, that is so cool.
I don't know if that's what he did with exactly with this one. I know he says virtual. I should have inquired more about it, but I know
you put on the gear.
Yeah, you put on the gear, and you know, then you can view this type of piece. I think it's really cool.
That's really awesome. I want to let the people who create art, like art, you know, go first.
I think this is very innovative, because if you're going to think about movies like Ready Player One, not sure if everybody's seen it yet, but they use a lot of like virtual reality, and you're seeing like society approach that age faster than what we have envisioned, mainly because a lot of people are indoors and we need to find other ways for people to be able to get to these spaces. So I think in terms of how this contrasts with traditional means of presenting art, such as museums and galleries, it's nice to have virtual reality work towards that as well, in order to, again, make sure that it's accessible to other people. So you might not be able to buy tickets to Paris to watch like go to these like highbrow museums, but at least it is through art like this that also makes it accessible for people around the world, especially when people are locked down. So I think this is a really great way to have these types of messages heard across different mediums.
The first video reminds me of, I know Google Translate app has the ability to like hold your camera up in front of another language and it'll live translate. And so I like the idea of another way of saying stop is stop police brutality, that they're synonymous, you know, in different languages. And the idea behind that, which I think is really powerful, and then that turns this like artivism into its own language. which I think is like a powerful way to think of it. And yeah, I think that's something that we've really seen a lot this year is really like the I feel like people have invested a lot more in artists being activists and have sort of seen that as something that you would expect from the artists that you follow and look up to and support. And so I think seeing more installments like this and more of people being able to take their own mediums and translate it into that Artivism language, I think is something that's both accessible and forces you to think, which I really enjoy.
I think it also, seeing different mediums like this implemented now, a lot of times, okay, so I'm going to be very honest about this. In the art world, and I'm sure all of you guys are aware that it can be a really snobby place, a really snobby environment in which, you know, you're not a real artist unless you do or use X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. And people who are on their computer, those aren't real artists. And then it's, you know, the constant sort of putting down of other mediums that are not considered the quote unquote traditional norm. And I feel as though one of the biggest ways for newer mediums to be taken more seriously, even by the art world itself, is by doing something like this, is by throwing themselves into the lot of people who are seeking to change things and people who are using their art as their voice and you know, contributing to movements and things, because it's like, well, you weren't taking me seriously before, but now you're taking me seriously, and now suddenly you're seeing what I'm doing as art. And so it's sort of a turning point once again, and again with the tipping point due to like you guys have been saying, all the changes with the pandemic and everything and the isolation, and it's just crazy because it does allow people to now utilize these different methods in order to have their voices be heard, and it's sort of legitimizing all of those mediums now in a bigger way, and I think faster than if things like this had not been going on.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's like you, just to piggyback off what you're saying about how, you know, some people don't want to regard this as art, especially whenever it comes to different non-traditional forms of art, which, you know, I like to work with. And at least in Shanghai, it's my organization, one other organization called Elevate with Charlie, who's really amazing. And we like working with artists that are doing, you know, something different. And a lot of times galleries and museums won't take them seriously. So that's whenever we act as like a medium to connect with them. And you kind of see how they, you know, they disregard that art form, but once they see that you're doing it and that, wow, it's, you know, it's popular, it's, you know, it's working, and it's good, of course it is, then they want to begin to adopt some of the same things that you're doing. So I like organizations like what we're doing, and also the like social media that allows us to break those barriers to the traditional galleries and museums. And it allows for, you know, people like us to be the forefront of change and utilize our platforms for change, because yes, a lot of galleries and museums are coming out now because, you know, companies need to come out and say, hey, I support the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, we got to keep face, as we say in China, keep face. So you have to keep face in everything. Some of it is genuine, some of it can be a facade, you know, whoever hears us, whatever, but that's the reality of it. So I think us continue to organize like this, use our platforms, and welcome different mediums of art. Oh, we'll hop on to the next one. So this is Fox Craven Art Studio. This is with, Scott Hammond. So him and his partner created a floor mural, and I will just go ahead and show it and talk as I'm showcasing their work. So this is inside of their studio, and they but still are big advocates for equality, ending systemic racism, speaking out for the Black Lives Matters movement. Scott had created a portrait of Breonna Taylor, and put it in his window. And they were using the walls of their space to put more content and more artwork that was reflecting the Black Lives Matters movement. And they started posting information about that as well, while their neighbors weren't so receptive about that, and they gave them a lot of slack for it. You know, they would go out their studio one day and then the portraits were turned around, or their, you know, the information was missing. And then it became a little bit more aggressive, where their neighbors started telling them to stop posting this stuff. They became really resistant to them advocating for this and utilizing their own space. It wasn't like they were, you know, taking up the space of their neighbors or anything. They helped to bring in traffic into that area for, you know, some of their neighbors. But they were met with such resistance that it ended up leading to them having to vacate the premises. And so before Scott and his partner, Morgan, had left their studio, they decided to leave one last farewell message to their neighbors, and a farewell message to the person that owns that studio that they're leasing from. And so they painted a huge mural on the floor as a message to them, a farewell message. So I just want to ask our artists, why do you think people meet with such resistance when it comes to change? And why do you feel people are, you know, so offended by someone utilizing their own space, right? This isn't like the students that were using public spaces, but they're utilizing their own space to bring awareness, and that was met with such resistance. So why do you feel people are so resistant to that? And as an artist, how do you feel, you know, using art to speak out coincides with freedom of speech? Are there any boundaries that are being crossed when it comes to utilizing art as a part of speech?
I'm just trying really hard to understand why somebody would go on someone's private property and touch their art, and that just bothers me.
Yeah.
And turn the art around, and it's not like it's music or it's a loud TV playing or the, you know, I don't. That irritates me so much, because I just feel like people are the resistance. I just don't understand, to the point where you feel like you have the rights, like you're so entitled that you walk onto somebody else's property and turn their art around and tell them what they can and can't do, is beyond me.
Yeah, I've honestly seen hate speech and hateful things stay up longer than that.
Yeah.
Up, but almost a welcome thing. And I even say from both sides in a way that those who the hate speech is against, I've seen them not be passive toward it, but like be okay with things remaining that way for a while, because it, case in point, makes their point that, look, we said that this hateful stuff is going on. Now these yahoos have gone ahead and done some graffiti that says some really horrible things. And so it vindicates what we've been trying to explain, and we need it to stay up so that people are looking at it, what have you. But when you see, activists putting things up that are the opposite of segregation, the opposite of hate, the opposite of all these things, and you see people be so incredibly resistant toward it, who, in fact, what's even funnier is that a lot of people that are resistant toward having it up and posted, they themselves actually share the same view. But because, oh, it's in a commercial area, or, oh, it's this, and we don't want to cloud our business area with this sort of, with getting too deep, or we see it now as getting the whole building involved, where we don't all want that sort of attention. And I think what's so funny about all of that is, in that whole corporate mentality and corporate sense, is that there's this kind of glorified ego complex that goes on psychologically for people who are doing this, because they authentically believe in their heads that they themselves and their businesses themselves are gaining this sort of attention, whether it be unwanted or not. And the thing is that human beings, by and large, are busy doing their human being things, and they really could give two less about you and about your business and about what's going on. If your services are going to come to you, if they don't, they won't. It's not gaining any sort of attention to yourself. It's gaining attention only for the point that it is making. And so the fact that human beings are still so behind and so I guess egregiously immature when it comes to things like this, it makes the point of even more so why this sort of thing is necessary for us.
Yeah, I agree, and hate that they ended up feeling that they had to vacate the space, because clearly it was having an impact. Seeing this image, the smash systemic racism, I almost wish that they had put that on the window as kind of a way of provoking the neighborhood of if you want to take this down, if you want to break it, and making them have to visualize that that's the hammer that they're holding. I think the only reason that neighbors would take so much offense to it is because it was making them question themselves. And that's something in the mirror that they didn't want to confront. Especially because it was clear by the neighbors' actions that it was the art itself. It wasn't the people coming to see the art. It wasn't the social media presence. It wasn't that. It was the messaging itself. And and I think things that break down the social norms compared to hate speech, like you were saying, Kat, in terms of how long that they tend to stay in the public eye. It's interesting. It's interesting that we tend to support, that as a society tend to go along with the freedom of speech when it is helping to maintain the status quo. And the moment that there's something that pushes the boundaries, it gets defaced, it gets taken down, it gets challenged instead of us challenging ourselves. And yeah, I really hope that those neighbors take a moment to at least question why it made them so angry.
Well, white guilt is real. I mean, I'll be the first to say that. I mean, it's real. And I feel, it just from what I've witnessed, I feel as though, if you don't have anything to hide or feel guilty about, you're going to be one of those people holding the chalk or holding the paint, or just, teaching children or adults in your community, what have you. You're going to do, the opposite, not be silent, not be hiding and engaging in what is categorically a cover-up. essentially, of a movement. You know, even in small ways, it's still a cover-up. And I'm sorry, but that's the sort of thing that the guilty do.
Like, I would also echo what Kat just mentioned. And looking back on the other piece of art that we just saw before this slide, it stated that silence encourages the tormentor and never the tormented. So there is some obligation that we have in order to make sure that we are getting those messages across. And a lot of these art are very peaceful, right? Like when you're talking about chalk art or like this art being painted like on the floor, like none of this is offensive, like none of this is actively hurting other people, but they are met with so much resistance, and a lot of this can be exhibited in different levels, right? This can also be reflected in how, for example, peaceful protesters who are out on the streets are met with tear gas or like high pressure like water hoses, and how a lot of people will then use excuses to like spread hate. For example, we have street art probably writing down Black Lives Matter or just bringing about into light particular social issues. And then this street art, very peaceful and is talking about social issues, are now labeled as vandalism and are now used as a reason to arrest these artivists or individuals who are putting up this art. And with the defense saying that, oh, we're not really racist, we are just trying to make sure that the walls are clean. So they're trying to wash their hands in terms of like how they're reacting to these forms of protest. And I think that's a reaction that people have. You're right, Kat, like when people are guilty, when they are questioned with the beliefs that they have, oftentimes you will see people cave in and become very defensive. And in the worst case, they will lash out against you for questioning something that they hold dear or something that they truly believe in and are now tied to their identity, no matter how wrong it is. They refuse to see it. And if you refuse to see, you would rather lash out and you would rather be defensive. And I think that we should start changing that. And a lot of Karens are gonna occur, and clearly there's another Karen here, like erasing that paint or like driving them all out. But this just affirms the problem that resistance to this art in itself affirms the existence that these social issues continue to persist.
It's the Pontius Pilate sort of syndrome there. It's just let me wash my hands of this. I'm not gonna say that I agree with this, and I'm not gonna say I disagree with that, but rather I just am going to wash my hands of this. And that is just, the person doing that has no earthly idea of how toxic that is. And I mean, it almost makes you worse than the oppressor in so many ways. But you know, that can be in its own rant. But yeah, very much so the washing of the hands, that was a perfect metaphor.
Thank you for your input. So the next one we're going to look at is from a political cartoonist, and I really enjoy his work. I follow him on Instagram, and his artwork, he specifically focuses and follows the Trump administration and what they're doing. So a lot of his activism and his political cartoons are about that. So let's take a look at some of his artwork. All right, and this is the last piece of his work. So how have political cartoonists served as a role in activism? And do you think they should play a role in bringing issues to light? I mean, it's kind of their, kind of what they are.
Kind of their thing, huh? I wonder if there's been any hesitance from any political artists to be like, how far can I go? Like, I wonder if they feel any kind of You know, because it's kind of like an edgy sort of art form, because you're going into politics and making art, and people are so sensitive when it comes to politics.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? I don't know. So
I know for this one, his name is Jesse Duquette, and he can care less, right? He's very open. He expresses. I mean, he's giving his own view on something, but a lot of the cartoons that he draws, a lot of the art that he draws, he follows the daily news. And so every day he's drawing something new that's in reflection to what is happening in the news. Some of the art pieces like this is obviously taking several aspects under this administration, his opinion of them, and then projecting it into the artwork. But whenever you look through his comments, he doesn't really meet a lot of resistance. And whenever, you know, someone does input something like, I think there was the one, let me go back. It might have been this one. So I was just reading through some of the comments, and you know, the comments people were making was just like, oh, the Democratic Party was the one who started the KKK, if you knew your history, just simple things like that. But there's always, and I can go deep into that, but I won't, you know, spend too much time on that. But they like take these graphs from like some ancient history and then try to throw it up there. But for the most part, I think people enjoy his cartoons, and it starts a conversation. And sometimes it, you know, in the comments, there's good conversations that are happening from both sides of the field, which is good. And I feel like, you know, that's part of what a democracy is to have, you know, conversations from both sides and have different opinions and how can we move forward or try to move forward. But yeah, so you can tell me more about, like, you know, your opinion. What do you think of his artwork, and what do you think of, you know, political cartoonists and their role in activism?
I think as far as like political cartoons, they've always been just like so immensely intertwined in politics. Like the logo for the Democratic Party is a donkey because of a political cartoon, because they were calling all Democrats at the time the animal that has a different term that you can call that is a donkey. Yep. And like, I think something like that wouldn't fly now in the same way. Whereas I feel like, I could be reading into it, but I feel like there was a certain amount of accountability in then embracing that as the party's image and taking that as a moment to go, okay, well, this will be our mascot so that we can embrace what we're capable of, and how can we add the patriotic colors on top of it. And like, I think if you like looking at this image, if you were to make like a KKK hood, the like icon for the like Republican Party, that would not fly. Like, there's a certain amount of accountability that political cartoons ask of us, and I think as a society currently we are much less willing to see what we can learn from them and to take the criticism and to stop for a moment and learn from it. And I think that makes it that much more important to keep creating. And I think that it's immensely brave of him to so publicly take a stance in his art and to embrace the comments that are coming through and know that there's going to be that much backlash, and to take that as a sign of success. I think there's a lot of bravery that comes in that I think is asking more of us now in this society that is supposed to be more evolved and supposed to have more exposure and more abilities to communicate and collaborate. Instead, I think that we've gotten more stuck in what we think that we're doing is right. And so I think that makes it more important now.
I think that by and large, political cartoons and political cartooning itself the people in the times, they're just so reactionary to it one way or the other. They don't actually see the brevity of communicating through that form, because when you think cartooning, it's supposed to be something that's very light and very entertaining and fun and what have you. And instead, when you contort that in a way that shines a mirror on current happenings, you know, there's just a certain element of I don't know, people just never in that moment realize how important that is. And it's sort of like the village fool back in the medieval times, that, you know, anyone else could say some sort of slur or you know, do a certain you know, lowbrow thing and be, you know, put into the stocks. But if the village fool does it, well, it's excusable, for he's just the village fool. And sort of artists and cartoonists particularly have that you know, little niche of just being able to bypass the sort of harsh criticisms that would fall on someone else. It's just a regular person speaking their mind and flat out saying something about a hate group, or flat out saying something about politics. They sort of get the whole, well, you know, you can't take it too seriously, they're just an artist. So it's almost like it's just this kind of loophole that they've found to be able to express intense and serious things in a way that they don't receive sometimes the full backlash that anyone else necessarily would have. And yet, I also think that society, again, like in the moment that it's being done, doesn't realize and take so seriously the political cartoons. But now, when we look back through history and look at like the things that Theodore Geisel, for example, drew in his time, and Theodore Geisel is Dr. Seuss, but of course he started as a political cartoonist. And when you look at his drawings of Hitler, and you look at his drawings of, you know, different warfare and war opinions and political opinions surrounding war and things like that, you think, well, this was little old Dr. Seuss, you know. But that's just it. It's that sort of, you know, cartoonists and artists are, oh, you know, you're sort of patronized in a way. But when you look at that and look at how meaningful and deep and abrasive those messages are, it's sort of its own kind of slap in the face.
So, sorry, yeah.
Just a tiny thing to add. A lot of people are complaining that, you know, why are we politicizing the racism, that the racism itself has existed regardless of the politics, and things like that. And what I find is that it's actually the politics themselves, the politicians themselves, that pull the racism into it as well. And I think that sort of they themselves in their platforms politicize it and make it political. I don't think that as a society, we ourselves are just choosing that the racial issues be politicized. I believe that as integral as racism is, politics is for us, I mean, globally, at any of our society, that they're both all, they all coexist, and it's all just, you can't racialize politics or politicize racism. It just all is.
Yeah.
So that's the last bit that I had.
A lot of those policies that are created that are, you know, endemic into systemic racism, a lot of the issues that we have, it is politics. You have politicians that are, you know, in charge of creating those policies. Yes, we can, from the grassroots level within our own community, try to enact change. But if we want that long-term change, those policy reforms, those are the politicians that have to change it. And it really shouldn't, I feel it shouldn't be a political thing. Like, you know, racism is bad, police brutality is bad. How can we work together to make this a more harmonious society for Americans? And, you know, maybe other people in different countries. So it really shouldn't have to be a political issue. But it's just like you said, it's all entwined together. It's a little messy, and that is what it is. But I hope people will, you know, don't get so caught up like well, if I'm a Republican, that means you're a racist. Now, if I'm a Democrat, that means you're not a racist. It's like, let's hopefully we can get back to we are humans. Okay, let's start off there. We are humans, and how can we make this a better place for humans without having to identify with politics? But then let's, hold those politicians accountable for enacting that long-term change that we need in this country.
Just to add to that as well, I think that issues, political issues, like we also have like racism, sexism, human rights abuses, a lot of these are very heavy and are very difficult to swallow for a lot of people. That's why they try to avoid talking about these issues or finding more about them. But the thing is about political cartoons is it adds a bit of humor as well as light elements in order to make these complex and heavy issues better to digest for other individuals. Because if you're going to think about cartoons, it's a medium that everybody has been exposed to ever since childhood and even up to this day, and being able to combine that and use lighter elements or illustrations to break down these complex ideas allows people to gain a better understanding of like issues pertaining to gender, sexism, or even like racism specifically, like in the rise of like police brutality that we have right now. And I think that this goes extremely well, especially with the existence of long form like written posts and articles, and sometimes people might not always bite into those types of mediums, and having these illustrations can really aid in terms of the understanding that they might have of these issues. So I think that it's a good medium to use, and I am very much inspired by this artist for their bravery in continually doing this, because this is not an easy position to be in. You are subjecting yourself to a lot of resistance, and the government as well, depending on your political climate, might also resist against you, and that's when it becomes really messy and difficult for the artist as well. But so kudos to their bravery, and that's something that we should also try to learn from.
Say goodbye to the, wear a mask and maybe you'll protect yourself from all that. Okay, so now we're going into the next segment, which I believe is one of the final segments in our episode, the resistance. So these were just discovered throughout the internet. The previous ones I had got in contact with the artist, but what I thought was very interesting about these was they were kind of difficult to find. Photos that are or artwork that was on the other side of the field. So we'll take a look at this artwork, The Resistance. Okay, so we kind of seen this throughout since the beginning of the episode, from Miss Karen watching the kids, editing the kids' mural, to just people, harassing their neighbors for clearly supporting the movement through art within their own space. So when you see these cover-ups, what do you feel? What is your opinion about anti-art versus covering up artists' work? And how can art help? How can art help aid a conversation about any issue? I know we kind of touched on some of these points before, so kind of we discussing the same, but I think, like, what is your opinions about people covering up? I thought this last one was rather interesting because the girl drew her mural, or a girl, guy, they, them, drew their mural, and then this person is just so agitated, right? They're so you know, they hate it so much that they brought out their big old bucket of green paint and was just like, no. And, you know, did their best to cover it up. But like Jennifer's mentioned before, you know, every time there's a change, you'll meet resistance, and that's whenever you know things are moving in the right direction. So just like the students' murals, you know, you will not silence them. And this person came back, redrew the mural, and said, you will not silence me as well. So what are your opinions about what you saw from the All Lives Matter being tagged over Black Lives Matter to this mural here?
That angers me. I absolutely hate when I'm talking to somebody and they say, well, no, because all lives matter. And it's like, that's not the point right now. The point is that Black lives, you know, we're saying Black Lives Matter, and when we're met with the argument, all lives matter, that angers me to a point that I can't even explain to you all. But I was thinking that when we were looking at the chalk or the mural where it was written, I forget the quote exactly, but it said, those who say nothing are on the side of the oppressor, something like that. Like, that's what I feel about people who go in and touch other people's art, flip it around. They're the people who go home and say, well, yeah, Black Lives Matter, but, you know, all lives matter. You know, like, they go home and, you know, they act one way in front of people, then close their doors and say how they really feel, and they sneak out and mess with people's art. I absolutely, I'm clearly bothered. I cannot understand it.
On that note that you just said, it was broken down to me in a way. I loved this. An example was, you're at a funeral and a woman is standing at the podium and she's about, you know, Frank was such a good man, and he did all of these things for his community, and, you know, we love him so much. And someone in the front row stands up and says, well, there's a whole lot of good men in the world. There's a lot of good men. They're all good men. Mm-hmm. It's like being at a child's birthday, and, you know, everyone's singing happy birthday to Sean, and someone stands up and says, no, everybody has birthdays. You know, it's sort of like, it's just so, and it's one of those things that it's very ignorance based. It's something that you can attempt to explain it that way to some people, and even with that, they don't understand it. So what's frustrating to me, it's almost comical, but in a very dark comedy sort of way, that people are doing things like this, because it's sort of like, it shows that ignorance. It's like you're wearing your ignorance on your sleeve.
Willful ignorance.
Yes, and the crazy thing is, okay, and the difference between this and that lady washing it off. That lady washing it off, I mean, you know, forbid that I should say, she's probably a racist herself. But these particular people doing this, I'm sure they're not racist, or they are not aware of whatever underlying prejudices they may have, but they think that they're doing this thing that's going to be inclusive to everyone and going to bring everyone together, and everyone holds hands and sings Kumbaya and there's peace already. They're not understanding that peace is only attainable when we recognize the brokenness around us, and that we are facilitating in the now. We can't get to that peace then, and you also can't force the peace in a situation that is so still full of turmoil either. It's sort of like, I mean, I this may be a horrible way to say it, but it's almost like, you know, changing a dirty diaper by putting on another dirty diaper. I mean, that's sort of what that feels like to me, seeing this whole, like, all lives matter thing, just the graffiti going over it like that. It's sort of like you took, you know, you think your diaper smells better, it smells like roses, but it really doesn't. It's just another dirty diaper. You know, that peace can't be forced. It's a hard won thing. It's something that accumulates over time, and only comes as a result of education and understanding and empathy and compassion. And I see what they tried to do, and I also see where they far missed the mark.
I wonder if it's even from a genuine place, like if they're like, oh, we're just trying to be inclusive, or I just think they're doing it to, I think it's intentional. Yeah, they're trolls. Yeah, thank you. There it is, trolls.
I saw a thing today that was saying if you believe that all lives matter, then Black Lives Matter shouldn't trigger you.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I think that this image is solidly, like, if you want to think about it symbolically, like it was written in black and white, like because it's, I mean, that's the matter of the issue, but also it is that clear. And they used red, like the color of blood, to say all lives matter. And like when like obviously all of us here listening to this are like aware of our knowledge of the vast amount of people of color who have been killed, and that blood that has been shed. So I just think that the shade of red to try to show inclusivity is so ironic. Yeah, and like I think, like, obviously I think there's a level of like tackiness that the person who has attempted to modify these pieces inherently has, but they clearly don't see that. And I think that there's a systemic issue of trying to cover up truths that you don't want to confront, and I think that these are quite literally depictions of that. Yeah, it's hard when there's like physical art that people can modify and change, whereas like you can't do this with like an image on Instagram, you know, on like someone's account that they're like being proud of. And like I feel like, yeah, I haven't seen as many images like this while in quarantine and as we're all like in our own little bubbles, and it's hard because I know I was seeing a thing about how, you know, you can post everything you want onto your Instagram story, but like it's still your community of people that are seeing that. Like what can you do to find the people that don't already have that sort of like similarity bias with how you feel, and like reaching other people? And so when you see images like this, you're like, okay, well, there are still people that don't understand this as a fundamental truth. And I don't know, I see this as there's just like a lot more work to do.
Yeah.
I think that, sorry, Brittany.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like, you know, this is art. Like you have taken the effort, the extra effort to go out and to paint over this. And I would like to think that they're trying to be more inclusive, but I don't get that vibe from it. And I would give an example for one of my friends, an older friend of mine, and she's just a sweetheart. And I feel like she just doesn't get it. Like she's saying, whenever she says all lives matter, she like posts a picture of Jesus. She's, you know, Christian and everything. She's just like, in her mind, she's like, but he died because we all matter. And she's not saying, she's like, I'm not saying Black lives don't matter, all lives matter. Like she's just like genuinely, I don't want to call it ignorant, but that's, you know, she doesn't know. She doesn't know.
Ignorance not a bad thing. It just means you're lacking the knowledge that, you know, I mean.
And I want to sit down and have a conversation with her, because I'm just like, I know you're coming from a place of kindness, but you are just not connecting because you have no other Black people in your lives besides myself, and you don't really understand. You're not going in your own community. You will never get that type of information or understanding. And you're a little bit older, so you're not going to be necessarily on Instagram getting all this content that's, you know, just trying to help wake you up. So there's that, and then there's this, because I think these people that went and did this are not, you know, the older lady. They're young, and they're the ones that are, you know, saying, you know, waving a blue line flag, you know, and I've seen those people, but it's, you know, it's obviously it's a minority of people, but there are people who are silently sitting at home and, you know, saying and chanting the same things. But even whenever I went out to protest in my hometown, the first protest, there was just a small amount of people. The second one was a little bit bigger. And the third one, it was just like, it was huge, and that the whole city was out there. And the same person every time, the counter protester, was only one person who came up standing on the other side with his blue line flag. And the other protesters trying to welcome him in, start a conversation, but he didn't want to have a conversation. He just wanted to hold it. And I think that's willful ignorance. I feel like you see your whole city is here. And they said they're not okay with this. And it's grown each time. Each time it's grown. And each time you have been the only one person in this crowd that's been, counter protesting. And it takes, some effort. But I'll let Jennifer, finish speaking. Sorry.
Like, I definitely agree with that. Like, oh, no worries, Brittany. But in that regard, like, you also need to, like, it's interesting to note that people started say all lives matter or white lives matter after people said black lives matter, in the same way that people will say men's right matter, or like the rise of the like meninist movement rose after feminism. And it also makes you question like your beliefs in terms of like what you're really saying. If it's fine to be ignorant if you also have the ability or willingness to actually be open to other ideas as well. And the problem is when you are only staying ignorant and not accepting any other views. And I think that this is why artivism is very important, because if you're going to compare it against other art forms that we already have, for example, if you have paintings or other illustrations, you make the artwork, you maybe print it out, frame it, done, display, or some of the highbrow artists will probably have a lot of these artworks sitting in some rich guy's mansion and without any other people seeing it, right? But the thing is with artivism, in terms of who makes it and where it's made, it requires follow-up. It requires people to continue coming back stronger, just like that image that we saw earlier when you have cover-ups versus anti-art, right? A lot of Karens, for me, when I say cover-ups, kind of feels more like these are passive aggressive people that are just, okay, I'm not racist, I'm just covering this up to make the sidewalk look cleaner. But you have people with red paint splattering all lives matter and defacing all of these murals that are a bit more aggressive in what they're trying to do. And both these types of people are very harmful. And this is why artivists are even more important, and why we're called on to have more people like this to continue keeping up the fight. Because the main difference there is you're not done the moment that you finish your painting. You're basically not done when it comes to artivism as well. It requires bravery, strength, and a lot of collaboration. And the biggest battle is to keep these messages standing. And that's going to take you more than days, years. You're going to be fighting against not just natural elements such as rain. You're going to be fighting up against people like Karen, or people who probably held the red paint in this particular mural. So I do hope that we are able to see a rise of more artivists in the future, and hopefully we can support them as well.
All right. Sorry, can I say something?
Oh, yeah.
Hi. Sorry. Okay, with the whole mural, right? I just think that it comes from, a point of privilege, where a person can just go there and they just say all lives matter. And I just think that with the Black Lives Movement but the Black Lives Matter movement, some people really don't understand why this is happening. And I can also take it back to back home. I'm from South Africa. The same thing is happening with police brutality and people dying at the hands of, police brutality. And for example, in South Africa, right, white people are being murdered on farms and everything, but then when Black people are still fighting for their rights, when Black people are still, they're going through, they experience racism every day, they'll be like, no, but what about the white people as well? And we yes, we do sympathize with the white people as well. We do understand where they're coming from as well. But this is what Black people are going through, So with the All Lives Matter, yes, we get it, but they don't understand the intricacies. They don't understand the struggles that Black people go through every day. And then there was the other painting that the other mural with the girl. Yeah, with the girl, right? I just feel with this mural, right? For example, the guy tries to paint over it, and then I think another person here, the person painted doll face, doll face. So meaning, okay, number one, it's like insulting to a woman. Like, okay, yes, you are marching. Yes, you are here, you doing what you have to do. But at the end of the day, I don't see your value. I just see a pretty little thing, So it also comes down to that. Like, yes, even with the Black Lives Matter movement, as women too, we are also suffering from that as well. Like, fine, we are fighting, we are in the forefront, but then people can just come and just tell you, oh, you know what? Yes, you are saying this. Yes, you are advocating for the rights. But at the end of the day, you're just a doll face. You're just a pretty little thing. And I just feel like with people painting over other paintings, it just makes them feel they're just uncomfortable with the truth. They're just uncomfortable with what is really happening in society. So they just want to make themselves feel better. And at the same time, they're not really like voicing out, or they're not really showing any solidarity, but they just want to just say, okay, everything is just black and white. They don't want to look into the gray areas. They don't want to discuss, these uncomfortable things that are happening. And yeah, and back to the, the cartoon, the political cartoon satirist, I used to actually look at cartoons from a younger age, like from reading newspapers, from, reading magazines, and back in South Africa as well, they also had that, and I just feel like with the political cartoons, they actually like not only speak to us as adults, they also speak to your inner child. And in a way, they also, we don't know what children read sometimes, but they also read such things. So in a way, they also educate the child. And maybe one day, you don't know, your child will come to you and be like, oh, mommy, what does this mean? And from that, you can be like, okay, well, this cartoon translates into this and this and this and this. Even though it's very uncomfortable, I just feel like it's something that it's issues that we have to discuss. And even though like cartoons, as I don't know who said, Jennifer, I think, it brings humor, but also, it also, I feel like they speak to our inner child, and it makes us, more aware of the issues, that sometimes we just want to ignore. So yeah, I just think like with Artivism, like it is a good initiative, and we still have a long way to go. Yeah.
For your input. And this is BM. She was from our last exhibition, the Black Lives Matter exhibition.
Hi.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for holding in there. I know we're going on 2 hours, and I remember we still have a few more. We're almost finished, but I really want to thank you for your participation. So I just wanted to talk about, this is from the Black Lives Matters online exhibition with Jareth Arcane. And I wanted to showcase her installation art because she's preparing to, put this outside as a form of protest. So this is her piece Paradox. And I would say for those who will be watching later on YouTube that she, took pieces of the, I believe it's called the Quran, which is like the KKK's Bible, or manipulated Bible, Bible to fit their needs. So she took those scriptures and put it on this cross with the light coming through, and took the tattered Confederate flag and draped it over the cross. She also has this piece, Gone with the Wind, which she also wants to install as a protest piece outside to watch it decay. And these were made from old advertisements of, auctioning off slaves. And then you can see some of the images, such as here, of the slaves being lynched, being sold. So I want to talk about these pieces, and how do you feel about using such sensitive symbols as a form of protest? And I find it interesting because whenever I posted this on our Instagram, and I was thinking in my mind, I was like, oh, this looks wonderful. I'm going to get so many likes with the small number of likes I get. But you know, I also thought about, what if people thought they didn't read, you know, the caption and the description, they just looked at it and, you know, it's under this hashtag Black Lives Matter hashtag, and, you know, maybe they would be resistant or thought that you were actually promoting white supremacy and Confederacy. But actually, you know, it got some positive feedback from those pieces. So I just wanted to know about your own opinion about using such sensitive pieces to be able to use it as a form of protest and activism in art.
I think that it's pertinent that they that when we feel like we're not being heard through the things that we, you know, create just from a base level, that we resort to materials that are factual, you know, tangible evidence of the points that we're trying to make. I.e., when artists use pictures of like the Holocaust, or you know, pictures of you know, specific things, you know, rape, violence, you know, child slavery, you know, child hardships in workplaces, you know, they have pictures or take evidence of like the suicide nets for workers in other countries, because of the suicide rates being so high, because of them being overworked in factories and things like that. You know, when you take those things and you incorporate it into artwork, what you're doing is, I mean, again, with the mirror, and it can't be more of a blatant mirror than to take authentic, very real evidence and very real documentation of the very things that you're speaking out against, and to make art with them. It's sort of like, it's inarguable in a way. And with this particular piece, for example, what she did was very metaphorical. She made the dress. It's something that from further away looks very pretty. The closer you do it, you realize the ugly truth about it. And she, the artist, didn't say, I don't like this. I think this is horrible. I think this. I think X, Y, Z. She didn't have to say anything. This is something that everything that is on this and that this is comprised of is what it is, and the reaction of the viewer, of the onlooker, is their own. And take it or leave it, your reaction doesn't change the truth, it doesn't change history, and it doesn't change the current reality.
Yeah, I think if I didn't see the name of this piece, I mean, now that I know it's Gone with the Wind, it's so symbolic, because we know Gone with the Wind came out, what, in the 1940s. It's about, you know, a white woman living in this sprawling, beautiful plantation. And, you know, Hattie McDaniel won the Oscar for best supporting actress. She was the first Black actress to win. Her speech was written for, like, that film was so important in Black cinema. But this piece, yeah, it is very thought-provoking, makes you think, because when you really step back and look, you see this beautiful dress, you look closer, you see the, I guess, like the slip underneath the dress, you know, what's really happening when you know, lift the dress up, or what's really happening on that plantation, or what's really happening behind the scenes, you know. When Hattie McDaniel won her Oscar for that film, her speech was written for her. You know, she went up there and was like, oh, thank you very much for this award, you know. And so, I don't know, this speaks volumes to me. I studied Black cinema for a long time, so yeah, I really like this piece. As sad as it is. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Yeah, my instinct in hearing that this would be put outside to be kind of decayed and I mean, gone with the wind and having nature take its toll on it was like, my instinct was like, no, but it's so beautiful when you like look at it at first. And I think that is what is provoking and about it. And obviously like the content of it isn't. And I also feel like because of that, I want it to be preserved. And I feel like there is such rich symbolism in letting time allow us to forget these images, allowing like the weather and the way that it may change from day to day, like take away what makes this so potent. Because I think that that's something, especially doing what I can as a white person in this time to like learn and to recognize how societally we have allowed time to let those memories fade and to let those massacres no longer be on our forefront. And I think that there is something richly symbolic in watching this piece fall apart and having that the power of these images not be as clear in terms of sort of flipping it on its head and making us look at it that way. And I think the like instinct of like wanting to preserve it is what she's going for, I think, in my, and how I interpret that. Yeah, and I think that the other piece as well is very interesting because when you like shine the light on those religious texts, it makes their content disappear. And like I think that there's something yeah, like the significance of those words vanishes when you shine a light on it. And I think that that's powerful. I remember when this was in the exhibit. I'm curious what this outside, how people will respond to it. Because this one is a little bit more in your face, I think, at least in terms of what it is at first when you look at it. And then you look closer for the symbolism as you do in both pieces, but because I could see someone, like you were saying and posting it, I could see someone looking at this and thinking it's in support of.
Yeah.
And I'm curious what having this outside, what will become of it and how people will respond to it. I think, I don't know, I feel like it takes a lot of sacrifice on her part to be able to kind of cut the umbilical cord of her pieces and give them to society. And I think again that takes a lot of bravery, and I'm excited to see what happens.
So to echo that as well, like I think the highest form of like sacrifice a lot of artivists do is departing from their artworks. It took her probably like weeks or even months to come up with all like them to like come up with all these artworks, and it's not an easy position to be in for you to depart slowly for something that you've worked very hard on for like several months or even years, and to put it in the public's eye, like beyond just rain, wind, or sun, the more harmful elements can actually be the people. So depending on where the artist is planning to showcase this also forms like like it's a huge sacrifice, like seeing your artwork probably being defaced by other people, but the fact that they're offering it to such a great cost, for me, is very admirable. i I think, like, specifically the one with the dress, they're not really manipulating any information or defacing icons that people might hold dear. These are hard, cold facts just presented in a way that looks pretty, but also allows you then to look beyond what you usually see in your privileged circle or what you see in your bubble, and allows you to look beneath that surface, and you will find that these are hard, cold facts that are staring at you in the face, and allows people to rethink the kind of decisions that they make and the kind of beliefs that they hold, especially those who believe that, like, Black lives don't matter, or in terms of like how all lives matter more compared to like having like this particular like movement, right? I really enjoy like the just juxtaposition of a very beautiful gown against the undisputable horrors of the past, and it actually just reminds us that art doesn't necessarily have to be comfortable, and sometimes it's just showing how things really are, and sometimes reality is not as pretty, and it's not just what we see in our bubble. It allows us to think further, like what is beneath what we usually see, or what we like rightfully consume, or like what we choose to consume. We usually just choose to opt for lighter shows, or like opt for things that are pretty, but at least like this actually lets you like, oh, you're gonna be drawn to this because this is such an amazing form of art. It's such a nicely done like gown, but like when you then look further, the artist is also doing their part in making sure that these valuable messages are heard, even if it started with someone looking at this mainly because it looked pretty. But again, it will serve the next purpose, which is to show you the horrors of the past, which I think is going to be great in terms of putting it outside. More people can see it rather than it being locked in enclosed walls. So I really admire the artist for that.
Yes, and I hope she documents it as well. It would be really nice to see a time lapse. And also, if she was going to put Paradox, the cross, out there, it would be nice to see people's reactions as she, put up a camera to capture people's reactions and, see how they respond, and maybe what do they do, because we've seen people deface Black Lives Matters, deface murals throughout this episode. What would they do to this cross? Maybe they don't understand the symbolism behind it or what she was trying to convey. Will they deface this one as well? And I think that would be kind of like the whole reason, give it to society as a form of protest, and let's see, what becomes of it. Okay, this is our final piece, and then we have a poem we'll listen to. This is by Jalen Pickford. He was at our last exhibition, and he sent me this piece that he just finished. All we want to do is be free. And he felt like, Black people are always walking on eggshells through society, trying to accommodate white people. And, he's really upset. He's biracial, he's Mexican and Black. And, it's very hard for him, coming from a place where you're always seeing how people are, treating and viewing you differently because of your skin tone. And one thing he had said to me is like, even though we tiptoe on eggshells, throughout the day to accommodate to them and, make sure that, we can end up alive at the end of the day for some people, at the end of the day, white people see us as niggas and automatically associate us with violence. That's a problem. And, some people don't want to hear that word, but for some people, that's how they view us. And you see how people have become a little bit more brave to use some of that language, and I've seen it come out in videos towards Black people, and not just something, I feel like that was a slang word, but there's a more harsh term than that. And so, I want to know, like, what is your perceptions whenever you see this image? What does it what is your own personal feeling? And I also would like to hear, like, Candace, being a Black woman, how do you feel that you are walking on eggshells in society? And you can also jump in on this conversation as well.
Well, I made an episode of in Candid with Candace not that long ago, and it was specifically talking about microaggressions and just how I feel like throughout my life, people have always commented and said, "Oh, well, you talk like a white girl. Oh, you sound like you're doing this like a white person." And it's like if I'm doing something that's considered proper or articulate, it's white, and people would feel more comfortable with me behaving in a way that's more Black or sounding more Black. And I don't think they realize how restricting that is for me. And I've gone through all of my childhood hearing from Black people, white people, all people, you know, like, "Oh, why are you doing this like this?" And I kind of feel like it made me feel uncomfortable in my skin. Like, I'm a Black woman, I should be able to be whatever the hell I want to be. You know, I shouldn't have to tiptoe or change who I am or censor myself, especially when all I'm doing is going to school and reading books, and like I'm not doing anything like that would bother anybody or people shouldn't be threatened by me going to school just like them, you know, and receiving an education just like them. I really like this piece because in my episode with Candace, I talk about how I felt like I had to change or be different. And I mean, now I know I don't have to be, but it's difficult now, even as an adult, because I do have adults that say the same thing. And it's like, oh, you know, if you're looking at me this way and associating my skin color with violence, or thinking that I'm out to get you or hurt you, or that I'm supposed to be ghetto, or I'm supposed to sound a certain way, that's how those microaggressions lead to actual aggression against Black people, because people aren't able to see us as people. They see us as criminals and loud, ghetto, uneducated, you know. I find it to be very frustrating. And when I first made Candid with Candace, I wasn't thinking I was going to talk about this. But now it's like, you know what, I have the platform. And I mean, I've been telling people gently, lovingly, telling people throughout my life, please stop saying that, you know, please give me a chance, you know. And I just hope it sticks one day.
I kind of want to piggyback off just like, you know, my own experience being a Black woman. And I would say being this unconventional Black woman, like for me, I'm just me. Like, you can't fit me into a nutshell. You can't try to, you know, mold me or put me into a certain category because I don't fit, you know, mainly because I'm Aquarius, but, you know, I am who I am, and some people, when they meet me, they already have a certain perception, but then sometimes it just like, it's not connecting with their mind because they have a certain perception of what a Black woman is. And that's, you know, and that's stressful. And I feel like sometimes I did have to, you know, act a certain way, or I had to tiptoe on eggshells, whether it be for my job or for school or, you know, for work. And that's very tiring, and we're tired of tiptoeing on eggshells because that's also stressful to our mental health. And we don't talk about Black mental health, and that is stressful. And, you know, you have to, you know, kind of speak two different languages, accommodate two different lives. At Chaos and Comrades, Ashton Brooks, who was one of the guest speakers at the Black Lives Matters exhibition, his magazine did they did an episode about talking about this, about how, you know, you have to, you have your language for your white colleagues, and then, you know, for your people, and you know, and it's, you know, you don't want to have to create two different languages, and it's not really like you're just talking to be who you are. But you should just be able to be comfortable in your skin. It's just like sometimes where people get loud, and sometimes, yeah, you want to get loud or something. But then if we do get loud, if we do something, then we're fitting into their stereotype. And it's very, and it backtracks on what we've been trying to push forward. We want to push ourselves in a more positive light, in a more positive image, because we're already facing these different barriers, especially whenever it comes into the workplace. So I hope, things like this to help facilitate dialogue and facilitate conversations about this that can help Black people to, feel at ease and to stop, like Candace was saying, the microaggressions that do lead to actual aggressions and the murder of, Black individuals. So I feel like this piece speaks volumes, and I just hope that we can begin to reflect, and that person is not just just look at that person for who they are, and do not look at their skin tone or your perception of them based off of media that was perceiving Black people as a certain way, which was not created by Black people.
Mm-hmm.
All right, anyone want to?
Yeah, I think like the problem with microaggressions is, like, to put it in a very simple analogy, like 1 pound of feathers versus like 1 pound of nails. Like, these two things weigh the same, but when it comes to microaggressions, like, they are often brushed off and are less likely to be called out, even when you are the recipient of such forms of microaggression. You often will have a difficult time calling out these individuals, and it's often very distressing that it's now the victims that have to tiptoe around this. A lot of victims will question themselves, like, maybe like the moment that you would receive like forms of microaggression, for example, like in the field of art, like I was told like, oh wow, you paint really well for a woman. So I'm like, this is a compliment, but deep inside, like, it's not really. So it's very difficult for you to react in these types of situations. And I know people of color like have it even way more difficult in terms of like how they face this in their careers and their everyday lives. Just walking down the street in itself is very dangerous for a lot of people, especially like the Black community that we have, especially in these times right now where people, like, white supremacy is at an all-time high. I'm just really furious that aside from more vocal and more concrete forms of aggressions, we still have microaggressions existing to this day. And I don't think that, like, these victims, these individuals shouldn't be the one to tiptoe if other people would be able to hold themselves accountable for what they say. So it's also problematic because of the stigma that we have on how the victim is always blamed. If you have like women going out in the streets and a lot of them will get raped, they're going to ask police, or one of the first questions that they're going to ask is like, what were you wearing? Yeah. So instead of like actually holding accountable other oppressors and other people, they're more likely to shift the blame to victims. And that's equally as harmful in forms of microaggressions as well, which leads more people to start tiptoeing wherever they go, which is why I think this piece is very powerful. I think the obligation that we have and the obligation other artists have is to make sure that we diversify the type of media and art that we put out. For example, a lot of the biases that people have stem from the kind of media that they consume. And if we start creating like cartoons, for example, that tackle a lot of these issues, then at a very early age, a lot of kids will be able to be aware that these are things that should not be allowed. A lot of stereotypes are reinforced by movies that we have, and a lot of them would always like associate like darker skin tone with violence, and a lot of this is being integrated in the movies that we have in the past, which is why I think it's very valuable right now that we use Artivism and we use other forms of media to put out and break all of these stereotypes. And it's nice to see a rise in that happening, and I'm always hopeful for the future wherein like individuals don't have to tiptoe around this, especially when it's the oppressors that need to actually change. It's not the victim's fault.
I agree. Thank you, Jennifer.
So one of the final pieces, this was just, I wanted to play and listen to this. I really enjoyed Jasmine's poets. She's the Global Black Caucus Poet Laureate, and she recently just did an interview with BBC News about her poetry. So yeah, I just want to take a listen to her poem, Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter. Trayvon Martin, Ayanna Jones, Freddie Gray, Natasha McKenna, Sam DuBose, Philando Castile, Terrence Crutcher, India Cager, Alton Sterling, Jeremy McDowell, Stephen Taylor, Walter Scott, Tamir Rice, Akai Gurley, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Jordan Edwards, Botham John, Ahmaud Arbery, 2.23 miles out for a run. Some Georgia boys filled him with bullets, but we don't learn until 2 months later about this ex-cop vigilante and his son. Breonna Taylor, an EMT, sleep in her bed. Police rained down a storm of bullets, but no cops have been indicted. They arrested her watchful boyfriend instead. George Floyd, a man of character and stature who stood for something, killed on a curb with kneecaps in his neck. The camel's back was fractured. Land of the free, built on murder, theft, and rape. Maybe collectively woke up, said, now I see it. Revolution's taking shape. Near and far, the world was sick, but felt the fracture. They ascended like a rapture, stepped in unison, proclaiming Black Lives Matter. Equality don't come on silver platters. The world won't rest again till Black Lives Matter.
Okay, so it's such a powerful piece, and I just loved her use of words to make it so poetic, and discuss not only how this has led up, how the movement has led up to this, especially for someone like Land of the Free, built on murder, theft, and rape, and how people just seem to forget about that. And I know that's been coming up more and more recently, but I think America needs to address its previous history, because that's what has led up to this. We haven't addressed this, and we've allowed the same negative behaviors and policies and practices that have continued to oppress our community, and allow people to feel that they're able to act as judge and executioner for Black and brown individuals throughout American society. So I'd just like to hear about your feedback on this poem, and like the role of poetry also in activism. I mean, it's not visual art, but it also is a form of art to speak out in something that's prevalent throughout history.
I love hearing it in her voice. Obviously, because she is incredibly talented and powerful. But I feel like a lot of the times when I read poetry, I hear it in my own voice. And I think hearing the like ferocity and the pain in it is something very pertinent. And I think I also like, I hear those names and I feel like I should do more, that I should like learn more of their stories. I should be one of the people proclaiming in unison that Black Lives Matter. You know, it feels like both a call to action and also a reflection of not having done enough for these individuals. And so I think, because I feel a lot when I hear it, but I also feel guilt and shame and anger. And I know that we talked earlier a little bit about guilt and white guilt specifically. And I think something that Kat had said earlier too was that that like you cover things up out of white guilt, but I think that that's one response. I think another one that's the harder one is holding yourself and people who look like you accountable, and recognizing how that's been covered up, and recognizing the hand that you've had in it by defending societal norms and what has been covered up and not in the media as much, and where there hasn't been as much outrage where there needs to be. So I think when I hear this, I both feel like I should have done more and like I should do more now. And I love having it told to me, because it feels very targeted, and I embrace that accountability and that discomfort, and it's so bold because of that.
Thanks for sharing that, because it comes from such a sensitive place. Like, to be able to recognize, something like that. You're saying, I also need to do reflection. I also need to hold people like myself accountable, and just being really selfless and open-minded about that. And that's really what is needed more in society, especially in American society, and just like the selflessness of having empathy and thinking about others, and also thinking about how you impact others. And we can see this through the pandemic as well. The simple act of wearing a mask, and people are, if you're wearing a surgical mask, you're more so protecting other people if you have it, versus you protecting yourself, and showing that I'm caring enough to help mitigate the spread. It's having empathy for others, and I think that's one thing that's lacking here, and that one thing that could also contribute to changing the police brutality and changing the way that Americans interact with each other. Maybe in like primary school, elementary school, they should have empathy class, and they should also have, I think, some philosophy classes as well, to be critical thinkers and not to easily consume any information that's thrown at them. Well,
I think sorry. Yeah, please go ahead.
No, I was going to go on to the next thing, but you go ahead, please. I'm like pointing at the screen, like you're here on my screen. So I'm like, please go.
Thank you so much for that. So I think that I really love this piece. I think that it's great that in as a form of artivism as well, heavy elements that are harder to swallow are made easier to digest, and the same can be said for songs, poetry. It's the rhythm in itself as well that allows this information, vital information, to stick in your head as well. Similarly to when we have a last song syndrome, at least through songs and through rhythm in poetry, a lot of these messages can stick to your head, and are less likely to be forgotten. So I think that this particular form of media is also very valuable to be used alongside all the other art forms that we have. And in terms of cover up, and it will always exist, resistance will always exist, no matter whether or not you're on the right side of history, you will always be met with resistance. And especially right now, I think that it's great to have pieces like this, because we need to stand up stronger on as many different mediums as much as possible. And I think having a poem as powerful as this one being read in their own voice as well definitely adds more to the nuances of how people are feeling, rather than it to be just words on a paper. It definitely adds more life to it when you can hear the pain that other people are suffering through as they make this piece, and it really adds more to the value. So I really like this and hope that more people can hear it.
Thank you. And yeah, so we're coming towards an end. So this is just our call to action. And we'll listen to this piece, and then I'm just going to share a piece of call to action to wrap up our exhibition, or not exhibition.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours. It will be ours. Oh, one day, when the
So we want to have a call to action after our discussion of Artivism, and I think it's important that we have these discussions, but that also we, continue to ask people to advocate for change, not only through their art, by using the tools of communication, particularly asking for a call to action for justice for Breonna Taylor, who was been murdered over 3 months ago, and we still have seen very little action taken place. So I'm asking people to please contact Attorney General Daniel Cameron, Mayor Greg Fisher, Assistant Chief of Police Robert Schroeder, and there's an email template down at the bottom. If you email them, and you can just fill in your personal information that is required. You can see here on the right, we have this Justice for Breonna Taylor checklist. Detective Brett Hankinson was only fired recently. Officer Jonathan Mattingly and Officer Miles Cosgrove are both on leave of absence. And there's been very little action that has been taken forth on behalf of the Attorney General and the mayor. So this is, in my sense, quite ridiculous. And speaking on behalf of my organization and myself as a Black woman, we already saw how it took a long time to just get the people who murdered Ahmaud Arbery to get justice, some form of justice served for him. And Breonna Taylor's name is starting to fade. And I know there's people out there that are trying to make sure that her name stays alive. It's important that even though we have, we're in the age of technology and the age of information, that we have lots of information coming to us from different news sources. And of course, there's news that needs to be covered that's happening throughout the world. But Breonna was one of the reasons why we started, started this movement in 2020, like helped propagate the movement. But we can't forget her. And we can't forget Black women. Justice has been served for others. More action has been served for others, but not yet for Breonna Taylor. So I just ask that you make this call to action. Does anyone have anything to say? I'm not saying I don't want to hear anyone's questions, but I just know it's rolling on 3 hours. How about, does anyone have anything they want to ask? That wasn't really a welcoming statement, right? A welcoming
You sound great.
So how about you drop a question in my DM and we can further, get back on that. Oops. Okay, let me hide all of you. Bye. So our second episode will be documenting COVID-19 through art, and it will be July 17th with our guest panel, Cece Root and Jeannie Ekins, and we'll have more joining us, and we will announce those at a later date. And so a lot of the artwork we'll be looking at from both the East and the West. Some will be from Under the Rock exhibition that I curated for Muse UNM in Shanghai while I was here stuck in the States. But there are some amazing pieces, and it was really interesting to see the artwork that came in from in China and the artwork that was seeing in America, and it kind of documented. I could see like the different responses people acted as a community and towards the virus and towards this news. So we will talk further about that. Our Black Lives Matter online exhibition, you can watch it online on YouTube or at our website, www.beyoungfinearts.com. And this is our social media that you can follow us. And finally, I just want to say we are proud supporters of votefromabroad.org. Votefromabroad.org is a nonpartisan platform that helps people, U.S. citizens from abroad, request their absentee ballot vote. So you need to know that if you're an American living abroad right now, you have to request your absentee ballot every January, and you need to return your ballot early, especially since we are in the middle of a pandemic, and you need to check with your the postal services within your country. And if you need assistance with postal services in China, feel free to reach out to us at Beyond Fine Arts, and we will try to help get you the information that you need to help you exercise your constitutional right to vote. And that is all. So I want to say thank you to everyone. Another great time with y'all. Always like 3 hours. And I never really expected to be this long, but the conversations were really great and the artwork was really great. And thank you, Corey Steiner. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the next one. And I just want to thank you so much for your time. And maybe you could join us in on the next one. Does anyone have anything they want to say before we end our episode?
Thank you again, Brittany, for organizing. Always a pleasure to be part of this event. It's amazing.
Thank you for having me. And it was a pleasure meeting all of you wonderful people, ladies, and hearing all your different points of views. I had a lot of fun.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
well, thank you, everyone. So we will see you later. And stay connected. Bye.
Yes, I just added everybody on social media.
Bye.